Hi there, knife people, hello lady and gentlemen. Welcome to my studio, aka my living room. And I have friends today. Today I'm going to talk about Hinderer knives. As you may know from my previous videos, I own a ZT version of the Hinderer. And thanks to Neves Knives informing us about availability of Hinderers at GP Knives, go check out his channel. There's a community post that gives you the link. I was able to use his link and buy this real Hinderer XM-18, which is a prototype for the ZT Hinderer. Having these two knives side by side led me to immediate decision to do a video about similarities and dissimilarities between the two. So, without further ado, does anybody know what ado means? I don't have ado. All right, so without that ado that I don't have, let's get right into it. Okay, so starting with the weight. This one weighs 153 grams, 5.4 ounces, and this one weighs 156 grams, 5.5 ounces. So 2 grams or 1/10 of an ounce difference there. Almost insignificant to even mention. Here, let's look at the clip. This one came from the factory with the tip up configuration, and the clip can be swapped. It's a hidden mount deep pocket clip that can be swapped onto this side. So it can be left hand or right hand carry, tip up. This one can only be right hand carry because the only options to swap the clip are these two, as you can see here. All right, so next most obvious difference. Some people call them thumb studs, but technically they are the stop pins or lock pins. And the reason I say that, much like a triad lock, when this knife is in the locked position, there are 3 points of contact or 3 surfaces of contact. So in other words, this pins bottom out against the frame, then the tang of the knife bottoms out against the cross pin here, and then the lock bar provides a 3rd surface of contact. So there are really 4 surfaces of contact, but these 2 surfaces here and here, they basically act as one surface. The important thing to point out, while these pins are the same diameter, 1/4 inch diameter, I measured them. This one looks bigger because it's flat on the top, and this one is a stepped cone, but the bottom diameter is the same, and that's what comes in contact. The difference here is the sculpting on the handle here on the frame is deeper. It's a longer segment of that circumference here. Here it's mainly in contact on this side here, obviously on the opposite sides here, and the depth of engagement is the same. So comparing the two, this one is potentially just a hair stronger because it has more of this circumference engagement. And believe it or not, when you do fatigue analysis on the computer, that kind of matters. And it looks like the stop pin in the back is the same size, and the frame lock is the same width, but it is apparent to me that the engagement anvil here, that piece that is visible on this side, it's not visible on this knife, so it's a little smaller. So all in all, I have a feeling that this knife, the actual XM-18, will have a stronger lockup, but there's no way for me to test it. The reason I took the pivot partially apart is to show you that the hardware here is non-magnetic here, so I suspect it's titanium, but it's not titanium on this side. The nut is actually stainless, which is kind of unusual. On the ZT, both sides are stainless steel. Everything here is stainless, except for the small screws. They're black anodized or black coated titanium. As far as screws on the Hinderer, they're also titanium. The difference here, the ZT has 2 screws and a captured spacer. The spacer is only captured in the sense that it won't fall out now that I removed both screws. So it's recessed inside the frame, but it's not captive in a rotational direction. So you need to use 2 screwdrivers in order to remove these or tighten these screws. Here, what's interesting, this nut that goes from the back side to assemble it, it's not captive either, right? But because it has such a wide flange, it doesn't require to be captive. All right, so let me insert this guy, center it out, pops in. See, it's not captive. I don't need to look for which way to turn. It's not a D nut like you see on some other knives. And then this is a titanium screw, so your magnetic driver bit won't do you any good here. And then I screw it in. Let's see if it'll torque. So it pulls in the flange, and it torques nicely. Okay, and so the spacer itself is also titanium. On this knife, the spacer, so the frame is titanium, non-magnetic, but the spacer is magnetic, so it's a stainless. So there's a mix on both knives. There's a little bit of a mix. Now the pivot here is somewhat puny T8. I prefer to see T10 or larger. It goes in, and at some point the nut starts rotating in its sockets, and you put the other side in. And then you're gonna need 2 drivers to tighten it up. Get it from both sides, which is not a problem. And T8 is a lot easier to deal with than a T6. All right, and here I'm gonna secure the pivot here. As you can see, I took it out, this titanium screw. Let me show you. Pretty long threads. They go all the way through and pop out on this side. And this side has provisions for the split driver. And it looks like the flange here, though, bottoms out onto the recess in the scale. What that means is that if you over torque it, it will lock up the blade because it will pinch onto the bearings there. So what I'm demonstrating here, that this slot is perfectly sized to use a penny, a US penny. I don't know if Canadian pennies will work, and I haven't tried euros either. Let's see. This is what I'm saying, is if you over tighten it, it will not. So I have to go back, take it out, put Loctite in, set it, let it rest for a little while. All right, let me take this out. I love these drivers here. It's very convenient. That pops in, and it's magnetic. So I really like these. So check out this link. Did I mention this clip is stainless steel here, and this clip here is titanium? Overall, I have this impression that if these 2 knives were subject to salt water or salt fog, I think this will hold up just a hair better because of just the percentage of titanium is higher in this knife. So Ergonomics, this lock bar here has like a sculpting for your thumb, and it feels very warm, and it does not tag your skin at all. And while the lock is very strong, it is not difficult to operate it. The thumb studs on this, I cannot operate even like when I pinch them, even if I hold these don't work for me, at least on a ZT. You need a superhuman strength to open it, even though the blade detent is not that crazy strong. So really, I think what's happening here, if you look at where the studs are, they're in alignment with the detent. They're too close to the detent, so you don't generate enough. Same here, a little bit maybe better. So perfectly fine with the flipper, and not even an option with a single thumb. And when I pinch it, it sort of deploys very hard. Another obvious thing here, there's a lanyard slot, and there is none on this one. And I don't know if you can see it. I thought originally that you may be able to do a Sebenza style sort of lanyard to spacer kind of attachment, but the blade just comes too close to the spacer, so if you had like a paracord, eventually the blade would cut it. On the Ergos, as you can see, this back here of the handle is not jimped, but it's cranulated on the inside, and this guy is jimped on both sides. So the reason to do that, in a reverse grip, it gives you a more secure purchase for your thumb. And what do we use? Reverse grip is your typical fighter self-defense grip. So I'm going to say that this is designed with a fighter grip in mind, as opposed to this guy a little more squared off. So if you were to strike hard, potentially you would feel a little bit more feedback in your thumb. Where here, it's perfect. This here is smooth, so you get one peak here and then smooth griptilian-like grip. And this guy has two. So think of it as Sebenza versus Nkosi. I haven't talked about the blade. They're identical in length. The only difference is by most states' laws, the handle measures from the farthest of the handle protrusion, so you get 3.5. And if I put it center here, I get a little more, 3 5/8, but actually the handle protrudes all the way. There's more of a tip here for more styling, I guess. And this again, 3.5. So I'm going to go ahead and call 3.5 and 3.5. Now this blade is a little wider. This blade is 1.25 inch, 1.25 inch. And this blade is 1.16 inch. The behind the edge thickness on the ZT is 25 thousandths of an inch, and on the Hinderer it's 29 thousandths of an inch. So this is a little bit less slicey. Right, and the cutting edge on these knives is 3 3/4 and only 3 1/4. And the reason is this one has a finger choil for precision cuts, and this one only has a sharpening choil. Both blades are ground with the Hinderer's slicier grind, because you can see the grind kind of moves diagonally toward the tip of the blade, so the front is going to be a little bit slicier than the back. So if you need a precision cut, you go on with the front, which finger choil actually facilitates nicely. But if you need a harder cut, getting through some tough material, you can get in here and it'll split better. So when you put this knife in the pocket, in this tip down configuration, notice how the blade is pointing toward my groin. And the knife sits nicely. And if I jam it all the way to the seam, it would have to be a very unlucky day for me to actuate this flipper. But it's not impossible. And as you can see, just a little bit of pushing, like especially if the knife was not all the way at the seam, I could easily somehow reach for something, maybe I have something in this pocket, accidentally disengage the lock here, and now the blade is open inside my pocket. So if I wasn't aware of it, and let's say had change in the pocket, I could potentially catch myself. Or if it's open like that, and I sit down and I want to experiment, it can potentially slice me right through the leg. And that's why the industry evolved from putting tip-down configuration on the flipper knives. But on the older knives, for example, like this Hogue button lock knife, if you were to put this in a pocket, tip down, there's absolutely nothing you can do to accidentally, maybe there's a probability that somehow you stuck your finger in there just enough to push this button, but the blade doesn't automatically open from that action. But I digress. Okay, so time came to swap out. We're gonna have to work hard on these 4 screws. And by the way, let's see, are these screws stainless? They're not stainless. They are titanium. Just wanted to verify. So I'm gonna... They could have just left it like this, as a lot of companies do with their knives, but they chose to give you a full-up spacer. And I guess that was the top. Pop it in. See what I mean? I can turn the driver like this. I like it. It's really well designed. And here we are. I think this clip, while a good idea, they put the access hole for the screw right where it should be the strongest, not the weakest. So they weakened this pocket clip significantly by putting it over there. All right, another thing I almost didn't notice right away. If you look at the flipper tabs here, on the ZT it's smooth, and on the XM-18 there are grooves. So you're thinking these grooves are there to help you open the knife, but even the greatest knife designers and manufacturers make these silly, strange mistakes. If you put your finger on it, if you try to use it to flip the knife open, it doesn't help you at all. You have to hook it on the front of the flipper tab in order to open the knife. So ZT engineers or designers realized it, and they just didn't waste any manufacturing time on putting grooves that are not doing anything for you. And that brings us to this little symbol here. Let me explain. You hear the reviewers talk about it, but that's what's in the package. Okay, so this tri-system is like that. The bearing is a little bit thicker than these washers. So what they provide is they provide stainless. Are they stainless? Let's check. I don't want to open the bag. No, those are titanium spacers. So they're titanium spacers that are thicker, and then either bronze, looks like bronze phosphate if I judge by the color, and nylon washers. So you could replace the bearings in there with these sets of washers. And while I'm at it, I can tell who hand assembled and tuned my knife. And I can't read. They hired a doctor. The doctor's handwriting here. The first name and the middle name are indecipherable, but the last name is Berger. So thank you, Mr. or Miss Berger. Appreciate it, because this knife came well tuned. It's well tuned. There's nothing, absolutely no need to even talk about the lock. It's perfect. It's perfect, just as the ZT version was also perfect right out of the box. And I know you've been all waiting for this all-important test. Here's some printer paper. So the ZT, I've used it for a while, and there's a nick, so you should be able to hear that. Yeah. Yeah, I can feel the little nick, so it needs to go back to the sharpening table. Let's see how the factory edge on the Hinderer does. It does well. That's a well-sharpened knife. I hope this is a well-sharpened, well-balanced, well-tuned knife straight out of the factory. With a good balance of materials, it will be extremely stainless because the only places where you have dissimilar metals are well insulated from anything that can create galvanic corrosion. I just think it's an extremely well thought through, established, solid design. And it's definitely deserving to be on "if I only had one knife" list. I'm testing the new ring light. See how brightly lit my face is. I'm enlightened. Anyway, let me know in the comments if that light works for you. It's blinding me a little bit. I'm going to talk about the question that's probably on my viewers' mind. Which one of these two knives would I recommend? And I'll jump ahead and I'll say this. I will equally recommend either of these knives. If a flipper knife is your thing, and you want the knife that will work hard for you, nearly indestructible, has all the advanced features that a flipper frame lock knife should have, this is the knife. These two knives flip incredibly using the flipper tab. They do not flip very well, or in the case of ZT, not at all, and in the case of Hinderer XM-18, I have to... I can't. I can't call it functional. Maybe it'll break in. And as it often happens, I was wrong. This knife requires just a little bit understanding of the technique. And the technique is not to try to push it this way. You need to slide your thumb kind of a little bit under the stud, and then it works just like that. So those are both great knives. This one is just a little less, well, I'm not going to say a little, it's probably about $100 less in the titanium version, and probably $150 less in this split personality version. That's what I call titanium back and G10 front. And they're available. These ZTs are very readily available. So now that I have both in hand, I am going to declare that user experience will be nearly identical. And the main reason to own an actual Hinderer from Mr. Hinderer's factory is to own Mr. Hinderer's knife.